Everybody's eager, huh? Okay. Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Giri Varadhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Giri Varadhari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Giri Varadhari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Ram Rama Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 17, verse 23, 24 and 25. There's 3 verses because 23 and 24 don't have purports. So maybe just read the Sanskrit and the English translation for verses 23 and 24, and then we can recite 25 together. 23. Sarve tirohitan drishtva mahasa svena detyarat sendran deva ganan shiban apashyan vyanadad brisham. Translation. On not finding Indra and the other demigods who had previously been intoxicated with power, the chief of the Daityas, seeing that they had all vanished before his might, roared loudly. Verse 24. Tato nivrita kridishyan gambiram bhimanisvanam vijagahe mahasatvo vardhimata ivadvipa. Shishirada Gokulanda Sitaram Lakshmana Gonitai ki Jai. Translation. After returning from the heavenly kingdom, the mighty demon, who was like an elephant in wrath for the sake of sport, dived into the deep ocean, which was roaring terribly. Verse 25, we could do call and response. Tasmin parvishte varunasya sainika yado gana sannadhiya sasadvasa ahanyamana api tasya varchasa pradharshita durataram pradurdruva tasmin parvishte varunasya sainika yado ganasa nadhiya sasadvasa ahanyamana pitasya varchasa pradharshita durataram pradurdruva tasmin pravishte varunasya sainika yado ganasannadhiya sasadvasaha ahanyamana pitasya varchasa pradharshita durataram pradurdruva. pravishte varunasya sainika ahanyamana pitasya varchasa pradarshita durataram padudruvu. Tasim pravishte varunasya sainika yato ganasanna dhyasa sadvasaha ahanyamana pitasya sarsa pradarshita durataram padudruvu. Ladies? Tasmin pravishte varunasya sainika yato ganasanna sadvasaha Yamana Tasin pravishte varunasya sainika yato ganasanna dhyasa sadvasaha ahanyamana pitasya varchasa pradarshita durataram padurdruva. Anyone else? Okay. Word for word. Tasmin pravishte. When he entered the ocean. Varunasya. Of Varuna. Sainika. The defenders. Yadagana. The aquatic animals. Sanadhya. Depressed. Sadvasa. With fear. Ahanyamana. Not being hit. Api. Even. Tasya. His. Varchasa. By splendor. Pradarshita. Stricken. Durataram. Far away. Pradudruva. They ran fast. Translation and purport based Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. On his entering the ocean, the aquatic animals who formed the host of Varuna were stricken with fear and ran far away. Thus Hiranyaksha showed his splendor without dealing a blow. Purport. Materialistic demons sometimes appear to be very powerful and are seen to establish their supremacy throughout the world. Here also it appears that Hiranyaksha, by his demoniac strength, actually established his supremacy throughout the universe, and the demigods were afraid of his uncommon power. Not only were the demigods in space afraid of the demon Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha, but so also were the aquatic animals within the sea. Om Jnana Timarandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadhvetam Savadutam Sahijanadritam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamascha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinu Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Harpripriye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhyubheva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityanamine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimate Kanana Swami Nityanamane Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Gurdasa Chaitvaita Swami Nityanamane. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Tathavaita Prabhu, for also being here. And blessing all of us with Saintly Association. And also, please pray that I can speak something that is relevant, meaningful, something that will be reflective for all of us, because I personally find these 3 verses quite a reflective set of verses. They may not seem it on the outskirts, but hopefully by the end of this session we'll see that there's quite a lot of reflection for us to do, at least myself. So a bit of backstory of where are we in the Bhagavatam, how are we here? So we previously have heard about how the 4 Kumaras, 4 child-looking like Brahmanas who are some of the oldest Brahmanas, some of the oldest personalities in all of creation, decide one day to go to Vaikuntha. And so on the way we see that a beautiful description of the Vaikuntha planets. We hear about the various celestial planes, and then we hear about how the 4 Kumaras pass through 3 gates, through very royal gates. And then they're about to pass through the 4th gate, but they're stopped by Jay and Vijay. The 2 doorkeepers of Vaikuntha stop them at the 4th gate. And in doing so, the 4 Kumaras, cutting the story short, the 4 Kumaras get very angry, curse the doorkeepers, Jay Vijay, that you may fall to the material world, which is full of anxiety. And then Vishnu comes, pacifies the whole situation, pacifies the 4 Kumaras, pacifies Jay Vijay. And we hear that Jay and Vijay are set to come down to the material plane for 3 lifetimes as demons. And then we hear about how Jay Vijay fall down, or they come down rather, and enter the womb of Diti. And then they come out of Diti's womb as twin brothers, Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu. And as soon as that happens, there's so much inauspicious omens that are in the atmosphere. It's described that there were mad fires. It's described that there were earthquakes, that there were tumultuous winds. So much inauspiciousness was going on in all 3 worlds. And then we read earlier on in this chapter about the amazing bond between Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu. 2 twin brothers, the bond between them. I think in this world we have 2 extremes. They either clash and they hate each other so much that they're always constantly fighting, or they got in so well that they're always supporting each other and loving each other and doing whatever they can to please each other. And the latter is what Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu were like. Hiranyaksha, being the younger brother, he was always trying to find ways to please Hiranyakashipu. And one of the ways he was doing that was to travel the universe, travel all 3 worlds with a fighting spirit. And his fighting spirit, his strength was so much that everybody in all 3 worlds was scared of him. And so we come to these 3 verses, 23, 24, 25, where Hiranyaksha basically is showing his prowess, is showing his dominance in a very unique and interesting way. Before we go through the verses again, I want to ask not a classroom-oriented question, but I want to ask a question for you to just think about. Have you ever entered a room and just felt like somebody is really angry in that room? I heard a laugh. Nobody's said anything. Nobody's done anything. But still somehow you feel that tension in the air. On the flip side, have you ever entered a room where you have felt, oh my gosh, I'm so glad this person is here? And again, nobody's said anything, nobody's done anything, they've not come and embraced you, anything like that. But your heart just feels at peace, just feels safe, just feels the positive vibes and the positive energy from that person just coming out. That's the power of somebody's presence. And we all actually have a presence that we carry. And that presence isn't about physical proximity. It's not that, oh, they're sitting next to me, so therefore I'm feeling their energy. Just being close, just being around the energy is sufficient. Sometimes that presence says, you're not enough. But sometimes that presence can say, you can just be yourself. Sometimes that presence says that around me you've got to be careful. Sometimes that same energy or that same presence can say, relax, like you're safe, you don't need to worry about anything. And sometimes that energy or that presence can say, if you're coming around me, you're in danger. And that's exactly the example that we see in these verses through Hiranyaksha. In a very extreme way, we see his powerful, intense, negative presence is just screaming, you're in danger. And so what do we see? We see in verse 23, if I just read it again, on not finding Indra and the other demigods who had previously been intoxicated with power, the chief of the Daityas, seeing that they had all vanished before his might, roared loudly. We see that the Devtas, right, as is described in this verse, they were previously intoxicated with power. They previously felt like they were powerful beings, they were in control, they had strength. But upon seeing Hiranyaksha's power and presence, it's not that Hiranyaksha said anything, did anything, but just experiencing his presence, they vanished. They just left and hid away. It reminds me of a story that comes, I think it's Canto 4 in the Srimad Bhagavatam of King Vena. King Vena was the son of a very great king called King Anga. And this King Anga was very pious, he's very respectful as a king. And his wife was Sunita, I think it was. Sunita. And she happened to be the daughter of Mrityu and a descendant of Adharma, meaning she was the daughter of death and a descendant of irreligion. And so when King Anga and Sunita had a child, that was King Vena or Vena, and Vena turned out to be a complete tyrant. There was no sin, there was no crime he had not committed. He was so sinful that King Anga became tired and fed up of trying to correct his child, that he decided at one point that, you know what, I don't even know if this family life, this householder life is even worth it. And so at some point he decides to give up householder life and embrace renounced life, goes to the forest and just embraces life in the forest. And so all of a sudden, the kingdom is now without a king. And what happens when there's no king, there's no authority, there's no ruler? All the thieves and all the rogues wreak havoc. They go around doing anything and everything they want, because who's going to check them? Who's going to stop them from doing whatever they want? Because there's no king, there's no ruler. And so at some point the Brahmanas thought that, okay, having a king is better than no king. And having a bad king is also better than having no king. And so the Brahmanas decide to speak to Sunita and say, look, we need a king. Vena needs to become king. And so they place King Vena on the throne and he becomes King Vena. And when the thieves and the rogues find out, then Shutrani Pashanagatam Venamatyugra Shashanam Nileyurdasya Vasadya Sarpatrasta Ivakava. Translation. It was already known that Vina was very severe and cruel. Therefore, as soon as all the thieves and rogues in the state heard of his ascendance to the royal throne, they became very much afraid of him. Indeed, they hid themselves here and there as rats hide themselves from snakes. The thieves and rogues who thought they were powerful, who were powerful because when there was nobody greater than them or no ruler in front of them, they were able to do whatever they wanted in the kingdom. As soon as they heard of and found out that there was somebody more powerful than them that was ruling, somebody more cruel than them, they fled. They hid themselves, locked themselves away so that King Vina could not reach them. And the parallel here is that the demigods thought they were powerful. They thought they had strength. And yet, when Hiranyaksha, somebody more powerful than them, turned up at their doorstep, they ran in fear because they realized their power, their strength was nothing compared to his. Now, if we were in Hiranyaksha's position where we entered a room and everybody fled, or maybe you've had this experience where you've gone to somebody's house uncalled for, uninvited, you've knocked on their door. You know they're at home, but then they just don't open the door and they just run and pretend they're not at home. I don't know if anybody's had that experience. Probably happens in India a lot. But if you've ever had that experience, or if you've put yourself in Hiranyaksha's position, some of us will feel disappointed, some of us will feel sad, some of us will feel hurt and upset because it's like, I'm being here, I'm coming here, but everybody is just leaving. But not Hiranyaksha. Hiranyaksha was not disturbed. He was not upset. On the contrary, he was joyous. He really found pleasure in that experience because he felt himself to be so powerful that nobody dares come in front of him. And so in the next verse we see, verse 24, after returning from the heavenly kingdom, the mighty demon, who was like an elephant in wrath, for the sake of sport, dived into the deep ocean, which was roaring terribly. Hiranyaksha, intoxicated with his own prowess, didn't care that everybody fled. In fact, he was happy about it. And in that happiness, he thought, let me go for a swim. Let me dive into the ocean and go for a swim. But then what happens? Verse 25. On his entering the ocean, the aquatic animals who formed the host of Varuna were stricken with fear and ran far away. Thus Hiranyaksha showed his splendor without dealing a blow. Hiranyaksha dove into the ocean just for sport, but all the aquatics swam away out of fear. And these aquatics are under the guidance and under the protection of Varuna, the king of the oceans, king of the waters. And yet they fled. Hiranyaksha didn't say anything. He didn't do anything. He didn't attack anyone or anything. In fact, in the previous verse, we hear that he just went into the ocean for the sake of going into the ocean. Whereas with the demigods, we understand that he went to the heavenly kingdoms to show his prowess. And not only did the demigods flee, but we see that the aquatics also fled just from Hiranyaksha's presence. That's how powerful Hiranyaksha's presence was. His presence communicated danger. When we look at the modern world of self-help, of communication gurus, one of the things they talk about is that 80% of communication happens through non-verbal means and 20% through verbal means, which means that our communication is less about the words we use and more about the way we carry ourselves before we use words, whilst we're using words, and after we use words. Most of our communication happens through our non-verbal means. And so we see that that's exactly what we experience and see through these verses, that Hiranyaksha's presence is communicating more than any words could. His presence communicated, you're in danger if you're around me. And so everybody picked up and left. And we don't actually have to speak to influence anyone, right? We see here in this pastime, Hiranyaksh just was present and he influenced everybody and everything around him. And that influence, that non-verbal communication happens in different ways. Through our facial expressions, through our bodily posture, through the tone we have, through the energy, the internal mood we're carrying, through the thoughts we have. All of that influences the atmosphere around us because it's all about the consciousness that we carry. Many of us will have experience of somebody whose very presence makes people feel cautious and careful around them because you don't know what you're going to expect, right? And it's not that they necessarily have to say something, do something. You just feel that, okay, like, I have to tread carefully around this person because I don't know how they're going to react. I don't know what they're going to do next. It's just the way that they hold space in that room. It's just their presence that is screaming or telling us, you got to be careful. Don't challenge me. Don't come in my way. Don't irritate me. Otherwise, you're going to be at the other end of my wrath, of my turbulence, because I don't know what mood I'm in myself. And we see Hiranyaksh actually represents this in a very extreme way, right? Because it's not only you've got to be careful around me, but you've got to run away from me. And so we see that actually the scriptures, throughout the scriptures, we see various different personalities that showcase to us the power of one's presence. If we just turn to Hiranyaksha's brother, Hiranyakashipu, many of us, or most of us, will know the backstory of Hiranyakashipu, where after Hiranyaksha died, then he goes and performs a lot of austerities. He gets boons from Lord Brahma. Originally, he wanted to become immortal, but Brahma's like, I can't give you immortality because I'm not immortal myself. So then he devises a plan where he thinks he can become immortal. I should die not in the day, not the night, not inside, not outside, not by weapon or by astra or shastra, I forgot what astra is now, not by man or by animal. All these different things he comes up with. And then he gets this boon. He thinks he's immortal. Everybody thinks, oh my gosh, he's immortal. He's got so much strength. And he goes and conquers all three worlds. Where Hiranyaksha's presence screamed to everyone, you're in danger, run. Interestingly, Hiranyakashipu's presence made people go, you're in danger, submit yourself, out of fear. In the Bhagavatam, we see that after we hear about Hiranyakashipu conquering the three worlds, we get a very beautiful yet interesting description of Indra's residence, of Indra's palace. It says, the steps of King Indra's residence were made of coral. The floor was bedecked with invaluable emeralds. The walls were of crystal and the columns of Vaidurya stone. The wonderful canopies were beautifully decorated. The seats were bedecked with rubies, and the silk bedding, as white as foam, was decorated with pearls. The ladies of the palace, who were blessed with beautiful teeth and the most wonderful, beautiful faces, walked here and there in the palace, the ankle bells tinkling melodiously, and saw their own beautiful reflections in the gems. And in the very same verse it says, the demigods, however, being very much oppressed, had to bow down and offer obeisances at the feet of Hiranyakashipu, who chastised the demigods very severely and for no reason. Thus Hiranyakashipu lived in the palace and severely ruled everyone. In the very same description of Indra's beautiful palace, we have a description of the strength of Hiranyakashipu, which forced the demigods to pay their obeisances. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says that actually the demigods were serving Hiranyakashipu. In the verses that come subsequently, it's described that the demigods would bring beautiful gifts. The Gandharvas would sing and glorify Hiranyakashipu and his power and his ability to conquer. The earth, this is a really interesting one, the earth gave food grains to Hiranyakashipu without even being plowed. So we think that's crazy that without even being plowed, earth is bringing out all these food grains. But those of us who know King Prithu's pastime, King Prithu chased Mother Earth because Mother Earth refused to give her resources. She withheld her resources because the previous kings were exploiting her. Mother Earth was withholding her resources for kings that were exploiting her and harming her. And yet here we see the same Mother Earth giving away her resources very freely to Hiranyakashipu, because at some point the scale tips where the fear becomes so much that instead of running away, you just submit yourself and do everything and anything to be safe. It's also described that the rivers and oceans would supply various gems and jewels just for Hiranyakashipu's presence, right? So we see that all three worlds submitted themselves and gave everything they had to Hiranyakashipu, not out of love, not out of respect, not out of admiration, but out of fear, because they were so afraid of Hiranyakashipu. Where we see that Krishna's influence and presence invites devotees to lovingly reciprocate and give. Hiranyakashipu's presence forced people to, and in an obligated way, to comply with Hiranyakashipu by giving him stuff. On one side, you've got a loving reciprocation with Krishna. On the other side, with Hiranyakashipu, you've got a very forced reciprocation, if you can even call it a reciprocation. But the power of presence isn't just in bodily strength. If we turn to the pages of Chaitanya Charitamrita and the Chaitanya Bhagavat, we hear very early on about a very young erudite scholar who is very beautiful, who is very intellectual, and his name is Nimai Pandit, who's Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Lord himself. But when we hear about the early pastimes of Nimai Pandit, we see that his scholarship was so powerful, his intellect, his knowledge was so strong that he would get into debates with any scholar, any philosopher put in front of him, no matter how great they were, no matter if they were considered the best amongst the best. And he would hear their argument, and then after the argument finishes, he would come up with a long list of reasons for why the argument is flawed and convince them that actually, you know what, yeah, my argument is flawed. You're right. And then he'd go, Shishi Radha Gokulananda Sita Ram Lakshman Hanuman Gornitai Ki Jai. He wouldn't do that at that point, but out of respect. And after he's defeated the argument and convinced them that the argument is wrong, he'd then give a counter-argument to his argument to explain why that original argument was correct. Now that's impressive, that's crazy, I don't know how many of us could do that. If I speak for myself, I'd probably struggle just to defend and protect my understanding of Krishna consciousness to people, let alone argue somebody else's philosophy of life and then counter it again. But that was how amazing Nimai Pandit was in his academia, in his scholarship. But with that great ability comes a great presence. His presence was such that when Nimai Pandit is walking down the streets of Navadvip, if a scholar or a philosopher is walking down the other side and even sees a glimpse of his shadow from a mile away, they turn around, walk and run in the other direction and takes a long way around to get to their destination, because they know if they come in front of Nimai Pandit, if Nimai Pandit so much as glances an eye on them, he's going to chase them down, he's going to drag them into a debate, and that debate only has one conclusion, and that is defeat. There's nothing else that's going to happen. There's no winning against Nimai Pandit. And so we see there that the power of presence isn't just about the physical strength one carries, but it can also be the internals or the subtle energy that we carry too. And I want to clarify, like, I'm not comparing Nimai Pandit to Hiranyakashipu or Hiranyaksha at all in their consciousness. Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu were ruling out of fear. Their presence was fearful because people were actually physically in danger. But Nimai Pandit's presence was all about domination through intellect. And so the pertinent question is raised for all of us, which is that what's the effect of our presence? When we enter a room, what presence do we carry? If we go back to Nimai Pandit and fast forward in his life, after Nimai Pandit loses his father and then attains a spiritual master in Ishvarapuri, we see that the same Nimai Pandit who scholars and philosophers would run away from in fear of being defeated and engaged in debate, that same Nimai Pandit, now called Shri Krishna Chaitanya, is going around every town and village to glorify Krishna, chant about Krishna, engage everybody in Krishna service. And people are coming hundreds and thousands of miles just to see him, just to associate with him, just to be in his physical presence. Because that Krishna who was an erudite, Nimai Pandit who was an erudite scholar who wanted to showcase his scholarship is now just inviting people to love Krishna. He's showcasing with his presence, and what's oozing out of him is love for Krishna. And we see this very much in the pastime of Chand Ghazi, where Chand Ghazi, who was, I believe, a minister of Bengal, he, under political pressure through the citizens, etc., had stopped the Sankirtan party from going on and had broken Mridangas. And when Mahaprabhu finds out, he arranges, along with the devotees, he arranges for a massive Sankirtan party, almost like a parade of Sankirtan. From every nook and cranny of Navadvip, Sankirtan was coming out, the devotees were coming out, and all walking towards and assembling outside the house of Chand Ghazi. Now bear in mind, this is going to be hundreds and thousands, probably even tens of thousands of devotees assembling outside of one person's home. Even if that happened outside the Queen's palace, how many guards does the Queen have to protect, the King's palace? How many guards does the King have to protect him? Tens, max hundreds? Mahaprabhu could have used that power that he had, that influence he had over all these people to completely annihilate Chand Ghazi, completely burn his home and destroy him. He could have done that. But he didn't. Because for him, the power, the presence he had was not to assert dominance. It was to attract people to Krishna. And so we hear in that pastime that actually, even though he assembled the Sankirtan party outside Chand Ghazi's home, it was a very peaceful party, and as soon as Chand Ghazi invited Mahaprabhu in, he went in, had a very nice conversation, discussion, reciprocated with Chand Ghazi, and attracted Chand Ghazi to devotion, to the path of devotion. And that was his presence. That was Mahaprabhu's presence. On the one side, you had Nimai Pandit's presence, which was about asserting his dominance of intellect. On the other side, you had Mahaprabhu's presence, which was just to attract everybody to Krishna. And we can fast forward almost 500 years, and we can look at His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. We see that Prabhupada followed that same principle of his presence. We hear in the early pastimes, if we ever read or hear about the memories of Srila Prabhupada, we hear, and I'm sure if we gave the mic to Tattvavid Prabhu would probably be able to say the same thing. The presence that Srila Prabhupada carried was just that of love. Bear in mind that the original days, when he came to the West, especially in New York, what was taking place was a counterculture of hippie, right? The hippie counterculture. And that time, that counterculture refused to accept any authority, refused to accept anything mainstream, and refused to acknowledge and accept anybody who looked like they knew what they were doing. And yet they accepted Srila Prabhupada as a guru, as an authority. Not because Srila Prabhupada carried that as his presence, but because they felt the love that was oozing out of Srila Prabhupada's presence. And that's what attracted them. And I think it's Giriraj Maharaj that talks about this, specific pastime that's coming to my mind. I think it's a university program or something. And I'm attributing to Giriraj Maharaj, it might be somebody else, but this devotee, this disciple was talking about how they were there at a program with Srila Prabhupada present, and they were chanting. And at some point, this devotee just had a surge of energy of love. This love was going through them, that they were starting to look at everybody in the crowd, and they just felt immense love for everyone. And then that love was expanding. Why everybody in the room? Everybody in that city. Why everybody in the city? Everybody in the country. Why everybody in the country? Everybody in the whole universe. They wanted to embrace every single being in the whole universe. And they were like, this is magical. I've never felt this before. So after the program, this devotee then speaks to Prabhupada and he goes, Prabhupada, chanting is so amazing, isn't it? And Prabhupada's just smiling and chuckling. It's like, yeah, it is. And then we see and hear that even many of Srila Prabhupada's disciples joined the movement because they felt that love coming from the disciples or the devotees of the time. And if we speak for many of us in this room who may or may not have experienced Prabhupada's presence, physical presence, when he was around, we have joined probably because we've experienced the love of a devotee. And I speak for myself. I thought I'd be purchased by philosophy, but I was purchased by somebody's love, which was so intense and so immense that it paralleled their love for their own wife and 6-month-old son at the time that I met them. That's the power of presence. On the one side, we heard or spoke about Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu, whose presence was very negative, very fearful. With Hiranyaksha, that presence screamed, run away. With Hiranyakashipu, it screamed, submit yourself out of fear. We heard about Nimai Pandit, whose presence was of intellectual domination. But then, through a transformation of Krishna consciousness, his presence became about making people mad after Krishna. And then we also hear about Srila Prabhupada, whose presence was such that people felt Krishna consciousness was possible because of him, like many of us. And so, the reflective part of class is, what does our presence exhibit? What are we transmitting through our presence? It's a shame Ananta Gopal Prabhu isn't here, but I just remember having this conversation with him a long time back. And for those who know Ananta Gopal Prabhu, he's always memorizing verses. And on this one occasion, he was memorizing a verse that spoke about how, maybe somebody in the room knows the verse, but that spoke about how one should always be smiling and happy in the presence of a devotee. Does anybody know the verse? What verse it is? Okay, maybe at some point somebody would have an inspiration. And so that was coming to my mind when I was thinking about this, because the presence of a devotee should make people feel happy to see them. So when we enter a room, are people happy to see you? Or are people thinking, oh man, it's Bhaja Govindam again? Are we exhibiting a presence which shares warmth, appreciation, affection, companionship? Are we exhibiting a presence that feels dominating, that feels discriminating, judgmental? Are we exhibiting a presence that makes people feel encouraged and inspired in their spiritual progress? Or are we exhibiting a presence where people feel spiritually inferior and as if they can't get spiritual life right ever? What are we carrying when we enter a room? What's the presence we're exhibiting? What's the presence that we're transmitting that is entering people's hearts? And it's not the words we're speaking, because presence communicates before any word does. And so we're not going to do this now, but I request, it's a humble request, that we just spend a few minutes with ourselves today, tomorrow, this week. Reflect and think about what is the presence that we want people to experience from us, and what is the reality of the presence that we're transmitting. What is it that people are actually feeling when we enter a room? And then take one or two things that is misaligned and align it. Work on aligning it, because at the end of the day, we want to be instruments of Krishna's love. And we can look at Srila Prabhupada and go, yeah, but he's a pure devotee. We can look at the Srila Prabhupada disciples and go, yeah, but they're pure devotees. But what's the gap between us and a pure devotee? It's that they have endeavored to get Krishna's mercy and Prabhupada's mercy. And we're on the path. And so we just gotta keep going after that mercy. And that mercy comes not just in doing active devotional service, but it's also about the character that we develop, which is multiple times mentioned throughout the Bhagavad Gita. The saintly qualities that we have to develop, the saintly presence that one feels. And so I'll end class there. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Any questions, comments? Tatavid Prabhu is going to enlighten us. His mic.
Just as you requested, I have an anecdote about Prabhupada.
Is the mic on? I don't think the mic's on, Prabhu. You might have to press the button.
It's on.
Oh, okay.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. There we go. So you were kind of suggesting that I might have an anecdote about Prabhupada's presence, and I do. In 1975, he arrived at the Dallas airport. That was the location of the Gurukula, and the neighbors around the school were a little uncomfortable with the Gurukula, because of the usual reasons, shaved heads, dhotis, and so on and so on. So I think the mood was carried by an interviewer at the airport. Prabhupada held a press conference, and an interviewer from the newspaper maybe felt some suspicion about the Hare Krishnas. So when Prabhupada was seated, he asked Prabhupada, "Why did you come to Dallas?" And it was as if, it was kind of cold. There was no initial welcoming tone, welcome to Dallas. Can you explain why you came? Not like that, but like, could you just tell us why you came to Dallas? That's not the way you greet someone of Srila Prabhupada's stature, but the man didn't know that. So Prabhupada controlled his response, and he made his presence felt by remaining silent. Now, if you have a second hand on your watch, do you have a second hand on your phone?
Yep.
Okay, start the second hand on your phone, please. Is it going?
1 second. Okay.
Okay, so tell me when 30 seconds have elapsed, because Prabhupada was silent for at least 30 seconds. The reporter's beginning to wonder, why isn't he answering my question?
3, 2, 1, 30 seconds.
Yeah, a reporter expects an answer, just like that. I asked a question, now you have to answer. But Prabhupada showed his command of the situation by remaining silent, controlling his speech, not being caught by the mood that the reporter was in. The reporter kind of wanted to hook him into a certain mood. And Prabhupada remained aloof. And then finally, he answered the question in a way that projected a different kind of presence. At first, his presence was demanding respect by the reporter. I'm not gonna play your game. But his answer was, I came here because these are my children. These disciples are my children. And the disciples felt great joy, that Prabhupada said that about them. And this was understandable, of course, to the reporter. Okay, he's got a relationship with these young people, and okay, so it kind of warmed things up.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing. 30 seconds of awkward silence.
Maybe 45 seconds. It was a long time, maybe a minute.
Wow. Thank you for sharing.
I heard Prabhupada in an interview with a reporter, and these disciples were saying he wanted to tell him, the reporter, please tell me about your life. And he says, why do you want to know that? And then, if you really want to know me, read my books.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. It's really interesting when we look at Srila Prabhupada, because his life is full of so much nectar, right? We've got biographies, we've got a Bhajaran series, we've got memories, we've got so many things, even about his earlier life. But from Bhajan Prabhu's share, it's very clear, Prabhupada's presence was not about establishing himself as an authority, as a guru, anything like that. His presence was all about attracting people to Krishna consciousness, because he genuinely believed that everybody could be Krishna conscious. And so he just attracted everyone to Krishna. And he was a medium for that, from his perspective. So yes, thank you for sharing. Any other questions, comments? No? Granth Srimad Bhagavatam ki. Srila Prabhupada ki. Jai.